Questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. On the day before the election, the Prime Minister was asked by Sam Armitage on Sunrise, and I quote, "You have committed to a freeze on the GP rebate. Can you guarantee our viewers will not pay more to see the doctor due to this freeze?" The Prime Minister responded, "Sam, absolutely." Does the Prime Minister stand by his absolute guarantee that Australians will not pay more to see the doctor as a result of his freeze?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question and the opportunity to remind honourable members that we are delivering increases in Medicare funding every year, and we are seeing record levels of GP bulk billing, meaning most Australians are not paying to see the GP or for the tests they need. We're driving the costs of medicines down through our price disclosure policy and the 6th Community Pharmacy Agreement. And in our first 3 years, we listed nearly 1,000 new medicines, three many times as those opposite in their last 3 years of government. Now, earlier today, Mr Speaker, I was fortunate to speak to Cathy Gardner. Cathy Gardner started battling melanoma at the age of 25. She lives in Brisbane. 3 days before her 33rd birthday, she was given the devastating news that her melanoma had progressed to a terminal stage of advanced metastatic melanoma, a disease which claims 1,500 Australians' lives every year. Now, in 2014, there was a groundbreaking immunotherapy treatment for advanced melanoma, now known as Keytruda, to which she was granted early compassionate access. She was a strong advocate for the listing of the drug on the PBS so that all people with advanced melanoma could access it, which at the time was costing $150,000 per treatment. Keytruda was listed by our government on the PBS into September 2015, and it can, thanks to our prudent management of the public finances of this country and our prudent management of our health spending, it can be accessed at a cost of $6.20 for concessional patients or $38.30 for general patients. Cathy told me that now, in October, well, from October 2015, but right now, she has a no evidence of disease result. So it's nearly a year has elapsed since then, so she's filled with hope. She continues to fight the prognosis, and she takes every day as it comes. But she said to me, this drug provided her with a quality of life with minimal side effects, something that many drugs are unable to provide a patient, particularly for advanced stage cancer. Now, when we are chastised by the opposition for our management of the health budget, I'd ask them to think of Cathy Gardner and her quality of life and her recovery, because it was our management of health that made it possible.
The Prime Minister's time has expired. The Leader of the Opposition.
I seek to table the absolute guarantee the Prime Minister gave before the election, which he won't do now.
Leave not granted. The member for Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister advise the House of action being taken by the government to make union officials more accountable to their rank-and-file members and clean up Australia's building and construction industry? How will this improve the productivity of work sites across Australia?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for this very important question. Mr Speaker, this parliament will soon be asked to pass, once again, legislation to improve the accountability and transparency of unions and employer organisations, and to re-establish the Australian Building and Construction Commission. These are vital economic reforms. They are an important, critical part of our economic plan. They'll improve transparency and boost the productivity of construction sites across Australia. They will improve the availability of affordable housing. They will ensure that the roads and the hospitals and the bridges we build are built at less cost to the taxpayer rather than having the cost inflated by 30% or more because of the outrageous and unlawful industrial malpractices of the CFMEU. Mr Speaker, we have seen example after example of bullying and standover tactics, of thuggery and lawlessness of militant unions.
The member for Griffith.
Their contempt for the law, their lack of concern for the workers they claim to represent has impacted thousands of construction workers right across the country. Right now, Mr Speaker, there are 113 officials, 113 from one union, the Construction, Forestry, Mining and Energy Union, before the courts for more than 1,100 suspected alleged contraventions of law. As numerous judges have observed, the CFMEU and its fellow militant unions treat these penalties like parking tickets. They treat them as a cost of doing business. It is a cost of their breaking the law. It is a cost they ignore because their level of intimidation over the construction sector is imposing a tax, a lawless tax, on every Australian. Mr Speaker, 1 million Australians, 300,000 small businesses work in our building and construction sector. They deserve to work in a sector governed by the rule of law. Right now, they don't. The Master Builders Australia have estimated, as you know, costs are 30% higher due to the working days lost in industrial action. Now, this is a mess the Leader of the Opposition created himself in 2012 when he abolished the ABCC, and he did so because he had to do the bidding. He is as controlled by the CFMEU as the Victorian Premier is controlled by the Firefighters Union.
The Prime Minister's time has expired. The member for Kingston will cease interjecting. The member for Lyons.
My questions to the Prime Minister. On the day before the election, the Prime Minister gave an absolute guarantee that nobody would pay more to see the doctor because of his 6-year Medicare rebate freeze. So why has Brighton Doctors Surgery in my electorate told patients they must increase their fees to see a doctor? Given the former Prime Minister had a GP tax, isn't this just more evidence that the Prime Minister is carrying around the member for Warringah's policy baggage?
The Minister for Health.
He wasn't here for 10 years, actually.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm trying to understand the rather confused end to the member for Lyons' question, but I think what he's trying to say is that Labor can manage the health system better than the Coalition can manage the health system. And that's absolute nonsense, because you know the dirty little secret behind the Leader for the Opposition's dirty lie on Mediscare is this. The secret is this, that Labor has no health policy. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen the Leader of the Opposition hiding behind the robocalls of his union mates late at night, ringing people, because there was nothing positive to say. There was no agenda. Actually, there might have been something. There was another great new health bureaucracy that the member for Ballarat announced, and the Minister for Immigration had to get rid of 3 huge Labor health bureaucracies when he took on the portfolio. Another one surfaced. But you know what the purpose of this new health bureaucracy was? It was to tell the Labor Party what to do, because there was no policy. There is no policy. There is no understanding that one part of the health system carefully intersects with another part, and overall the total management produces the outcomes that the Prime Minister spoke of: new medicines, new listings, an ability for a government to put patients at the centre of healthcare in Australia, something the Labor Party couldn't do. In fact, the member for Sydney who interjects, reflecting on her magnificent stewardship of the Australian health system, you know what she said? She said, "Everything I did I paid for. And you know how I paid for it? I targeted private health insurance." Wonderful, isn't it? Everything I did I paid for by targeting private health insurance. It illustrates a fundamental misunderstanding of Labor, that if you don't have a strong private system, you don't have a strong public system. It indicates a complete misunderstanding of Labor. A previous health minister who couldn't pay for the medicines that the Prime Minister talked about and made no apology. Now, in the absence of no health policy during the election, we've had to go back and look at Labor's record in government because we have no policy, so let's judge them by what they did. What they did was cut $6 billion from Medicare and medicines. What they did was cut $1.4 billion from pathology and diagnostic imaging. What they did was break an imaginary $57 billion promise on hospitals. What they did was wage war on future cures to diseases by trying to take $400 million out of medical research. What they did, judge them by what they did and what they say, and their Mediscare lies have been revealed.
The member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer advise the House on the importance of an efficient construction sector to Australia's transitioning economy? How is the government supporting the construction sector, especially the small and medium businesses struggling against the corruption and lawlessness on Australia's building sites?
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Brisbane for his question on this incredibly important topic about productivity in the building and construction industry. The CFMEU's grip on the building and construction industry in this country is crushing productivity, Mr Speaker, crushing productivity and increasing the costs to the Australian taxpayer of important building works and infrastructure works all around the country. And as the Prime Minister just reminded the House, there are over 100 CFMEU officials before the courts, Mr Speaker. And one of those who are before the courts at the moment, Mr Speaker, is Mr Mick Miles. Now, Mr Mick Miles is in court on a matter, and the member for Brisbane would know about this because it relates to an issue and an occurrence in his own electorate. Now, Mr Miles attended the RNA K1 commercial tower project on the 21st of January 2015, and he met with the site management. And during the meeting, Mr Miles said the head contractor had engaged a tiling company that did not have an approved EBA. Now, what it turns out, Mr Speaker, is the tiling company, as the contractor told the union official, had a current and valid enterprise agreement. Now, the response that was brought back from Mr Miles, he made threatening remarks to the effect of, well, what will it cost you to if the job is shut down? And then he also referred to an industrial action some 2 months before at the Queensland Children's Hospital site. Not even Queensland Children's Hospital is immune from the productivity-crushing activities of the CFMEU. And so Mr Miles went down there in January of last year and he spoke to the employees, and what do you know? They all left the site, Mr Speaker. They all left the site, and when approached by the site manager, Mr Miles told him they've left the site because of the tilers. We're not happy with the tilers. So they shut the site down, and as a result of this industrial action, a concrete pour that had been scheduled to take place that day had to be cancelled. Now, Mr Speaker, if you want to improve productivity in the construction and building industry, if you want to ensure the effectiveness of taxpayers' dollars in building important infrastructure, whether it be hospitals or whether it be schools or whether it be roads or bridges or ports or wherever it may be, you must free the building and construction industry of the vice-like grip of the CFMEU, aided and abetted by those opposite, Mr Speaker, who refuse to support the passage of the reintroduction of the ABCC. This is an important economic reform, Mr Speaker. It is an important economic reform that will drive productivity, that will support wages growth, that will support increases in profits of small businesses so they can grow and expand. The only thing those opposite want to grow and expand is the influence of the CFMEU.
Has expired. The member for McEwen and second Deputy Speaker will cease interjecting. The member for Barton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, yesterday ACOS released its poverty report revealing that around 730,000 Australian children are living in poverty. Prime Minister, how does cutting family payments to struggling families with vulnerable children by up to $3,000 a year help combat child poverty in Australia? And why is the Prime Minister continuing to carry around the former Prime Minister's policy baggage by persisting with these cruel cuts?
The member's time has expired. The Prime Minister has the call.
Yes, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for a question. As I've said in this House many times before, the government is focused on ensuring Australia remains a high-wage, first-world economy with a generous social welfare safety net. Fairness is an absolutely critical element of our national economic plan. Now, many people speak about inequality. Let me say this. The greatest inequality starts with joblessness. Unemployment is the principal driver of poverty. Now, we are committed on our side of the House to ensure that our tax and transfer systems support those most in need. The honourable member has, sitting next to her on her right, the Shadow Assistant Treasurer, who has published extensively in his days when he didn't have to run off the talking points written in the Leader of the Opposition's office, and he talked about how well Australia's benefit system was means-tested and how it delivered therefore much less inequality in household income than comparable developed economies such as the United States. So a targeted social welfare system coupled with strong economic growth is absolutely critical. So our commitment is we target the taxpayer support to those who need it most, we encourage those who can work to work and use their own means to support themselves where possible. Well, I'm glad the honourable member for Jagga has chosen this moment to interject, because she reminds me that she herself said memorably when she was a minister responsible for social services, the best way to keep people out of poverty is to keep them in jobs. So what we are doing is driving strong economic growth.
The Prime Minister. Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? Prime Minister? Prime Minister concluded his answer? The member for Kennedy. Member for Kennedy has the call. If members on my left can cease interjecting, the member for Kennedy.
Question to the Treasurer. Australian companies pay to CEOs, most of whom are from overseas, are illustrated by, for example, the Commonwealth Bank CEO receiving $12.3 million, Qantas CEO $12.96 million, Westpac CEO $9.6 million, Caltex CEO $13.4 million, Macquarie Bank $16.3 million. Will the Treasurer introduce a CEO's salary and average employee wages transparency register as touted by the British Prime Minister, and will his government consider tax rates in line with other, particularly European countries, where the issue of huge and ever-widening disparity in income for the powerful is addressed by a graduated tax rate?
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. And like many people, I'm sure when we see these figures of these salaries, of whether they be corporate CEOs or others, Mr Speaker, then as people reflect in their own circumstances, they are very anxious about it. And I think they ask many questions about it, Mr Speaker, and particularly at a time people would be as anxious about it because what we've seen in recent times of real wages growth being very modest, Mr Speaker. And what's important is that we do things in this country that can ensure that we can grow real wages and we can support companies to increase what they're earning so they can pay their employees more. And this government is focused on a national economic plan that is designed to try and boost investment in our economy, to support small businesses in particular, but businesses more generally, so they can invest back in their businesses and grow the real wages of Australians. That's what we're doing to support the growth of real wages in this country, which is ultimately, I think, the key point the member is most interested in. Now, in terms of those in senior corporate positions and what they're paid, they're matters for their boards. And they are accountable to their boards, those CEOs, and those boards are accountable to their shareholders, and particularly in major companies, whether they be banks or large retail companies or whatever company it is. They have an accountability also to their customer base and the social contract they have in the economy in which they exist. And it's important for those companies to get that balance right, or indeed face the questioning and face the reactions of the Australian public. But these are matters for those boards to determine. This is a free enterprise country. For over 200 years, this country has prospered through the investment of companies in this country that has seen jobs created, infrastructure built and profits gained, and as a result the overall majority of Australians being able to benefit. Now, that disparity is as you say it is. It is as you say it is, but it is up for those companies to get the balance right in terms of how they set those arrangements with their shareholders and their overall accountability to the Australian public for the social licence that they have to operate in Australia.
The member for Capricornia.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources. Will the Deputy Prime Minister advise the House what steps the government has taken to deliver critical water infrastructure across Australia? Is the Minister aware of any threats to construction of water infrastructure, particularly in my electorate of Capricornia?
Good question. The Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for a question, and I understand the frustration she must feel with the Labor Party's inertia and incompetence and excuses in anything to do with water infrastructure. Every day we are working harder to make sure we deliver on water infrastructure. Just this morning I had the Minister for Water from Western Australia, Minister Mia Davies, and we signed off a further $6.3 million funding for 7 feasibility studies across the state of Western Australia. We talk about projects such as a Mile Up Wellington Infrastructure and Water Use Improvement Project, which, when constructed, will provide a further 9,000 hectares of irrigation and create 1,500 jobs. We talked about the Southern Forest Project, which would involve the construction of a 15 gigalitre dam and create a further 225 jobs. We discussed also the expansion of the Ord River, which would double the capacity of water, taking irrigation and jobs all the way from Western Australia back into the Northern Territory. And what we've also done is made sure that we continue to work for the further development and continue to strive for the further development of Queensland. However, we're getting no support from Queensland. Even though we put $19.8 million on the table for 14 feasibility studies, not one of these have been started. Now, even though we've put $130 million on the table for Rookwood Weir, we haven't heard sight nor sound about them wishing to start this from the Queensland government. Just to show you the form of inertia and what we're up against, the former Premier of Queensland, Premier Peter Beattie, announced in 2006 that Rookwood Weir would be completed by 2011. He even announced the funding to accelerate its construction. In 2006, Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk was also elected, and so she was elected on the promise to build a dam which she still hasn't even started. 10 years later, in the ironically named Building Queensland, in the department named Building Queensland, they've said they're going to have to wait for another year before they get the business case done. This is ridiculous inertia, hopeless incompetence. It is absolutely epitomises what the Labor Party is, whether it's their inability to keep the lights on in South Australia or build a dam in Queensland. However, there was one dam they built. They built Cotter Dam in the ACT. It started off as a contract price of $120 million, but that's where the CFMEU got involved. By the time they'd finished, it cost $409 million. In fact, in 2012, the CFMEU blockaded the site. This is the same CFMEU which has donated more than $2.3 million over 5 years, 2.14 to the Labor Party, and everybody asks where the rest of the money go. Well, to their coalition colleagues, the Greens. And what did we get for that? What we got for that was 112 CFMEU representatives before the courts and 1,129 breaches of the
Deputy
law.
Prime Minister's time has expired. The member for Bruce.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Andrew Johnson from my electorate has profound autism, bipolar disorder, attention deficit disorder, epilepsy. He cannot speak and needs a stomach tube to help him eat. Yet Andrew's mother was asked by Centrelink to prove Andrew's eligibility for the disability support pension, despite him being eligible for many years. Why is the Prime Minister continuing the cruelty of the Abbott government, instead of ensuring that people with disability like Andrew, who have no capacity to work, will continue to receive the disability support pension?
The Prime Minister. The member for Barton will cease interjecting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pairing out the political rhetoric and from the honourable member's question, his constituent faces clearly a large number of very serious conditions, and his mother clearly has an enormous challenge in caring for him. And we care for her. We care for her. That is why we are rolling out the NDIS across the country. And
member for Jagga.
the matter that he raises is an important one, because I can say that just as fairness is an absolutely critical, essential element in our economic plan, so too is compassionate love a key part, the key part of everything we do in terms of caring for those people who are ill, who are disabled. And I'll ask the minister, who has the courage of this portfolio, to expand on this answer to your question.
The Minister for Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his question. I'm certainly very happy to get any particular individual details with respect to the person, the subject matter of your question. It is absolutely the case. Indeed, it was a process that was started when you were in government. It is absolutely the case that the accessibility matrix of levels of disability around the disability support pension changed, and further, under our side of government, there have been more stringent application processes, including consideration of new applications by a Commonwealth-appointed government doctor, and looking at all those people in the system under 35 to ensure that those people in the disability support pension system who have a capacity to work, although that might be a modest or limited capacity, are properly assessed for that. Now you make the point. You make the point based on the information that you've provided here that this person seems to not fit inside those changes, and of course I'll have a very good look at that. But I might just add, for the benefit of the House, that the reason that these changes were undertaken, and indeed it was a process with the nature of the assessments and the disability tables that was started by members opposite under your own government, the reason that these changes happened was that in 30 June 2014, the DSP population, which had been growing very, very steadily at around 7.6% each year, had reached 830,000 individuals, which, when you took out children and other non-working age people from the Australian population, represented a 1 in 20 rate of working-age Australians on the disability support pension, which is why more stringent processes were put in place. But I'd be very pleased to look at this particular individual case and to see where that fits into these processes.
The member for Macmillan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question to the Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Employment. Will the Minister outline to the House the government's commitment to ensure that employer and employee organisations always act in the best interests of their members? What hurdles exist to improve productivity in the building and construction industry?
The Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Employment.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Macmillan for his question. And I would point out to the member for Macmillan that the last time that the Australian Building and Construction Commission existed in Australia, building and construction productivity increased by 16.8%, and the consumers were saved $7.5 billion in needless expenses that would have occurred without the ABCC being in place. A tough cop on the industrial beat creates jobs, it boosts growth, it improves productivity, it saves the economy needless expense, and it protects
member for
workers
Griffith.
and employers alike. So, Mr Speaker, it is passing strange that the Leader of the Opposition is so opposed to the Australian Building and Construction Commission and the Registered Organisations Commission being reintroduced by this government. Now, Mr Speaker, much attention has revolved around the $2.3 million worth of donations that the CFMEU has provided the Labor Party in the last 5 years. And remember that that doesn't even include the last federal election period. That is to the end of the financial year last year, Mr Speaker, not this year. So goodness knows how much more that has increased in that period. But the CFMEU, of course, aren't the only union that has a controlling stake in the Australian Labor Party. The Australian Workers' Union, Mr Speaker, has been a big donor to the Labor Party. Now, in the 2007 election, the AWU donated $63,000 to the Leader of the Opposition's own campaign in Maribyrnong. Now, it doesn't seem as vast as $2.3 million, but for everyone in the House, they know that a donation of $63,000 to your campaign is a big donation. It's not something you would simply forget, Mr Speaker. It's not $630. It isn't $63 in raffle tickets. It's $63,000 in the Maribyrnong Labor Party campaign. This is a safe Labor seat. It's not as though the Victorian Liberal Party would have been pouring resources into Maribyrnong to try and win that seat. The truth is it's a safe Labor seat, and yet the AWU gave the Leader of the Opposition $63,000. Worse than that, Mr Speaker, he forgot about it. He hid it. He hid that amount of money, Mr Speaker, not just for the next financial year. It wasn't an inadvertent error. He hid it for 8 years, Mr Speaker. 8 years. And the only time it became public knowledge was when he had to appear in the Royal Commission. He declared it 2 days before. If he votes for the ABCC and the ROC, he can expunge this failure. Otherwise, he's just a union cat's
The Minister's
paw.
time has expired. The member for Isaacs.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to reports that the Prime Minister donated $2 million to the Liberal Party during the election. Given the deadline for lodging AEC returns has now passed, what donations has the Prime Minister disclosed to the AEC?
The honourable member is very familiar with the rules and regulations relating to electoral donations, and all will become clear when donations are revealed in accordance with the Act.
The Prime Minister's concluded his answer. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, under practice, ministers are expected to answer questions on the day that they're asked, not to take a question like that which he knows the answer to and refusing to tell the Parliament.
His seat. He has no point of order and he knows it. The member for Petrie has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Will the Minister please update the House on action the government is taking to make our community safer, particularly amongst members of criminal gangs? Is the Minister aware of any alternative approaches?
The Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Well, there's still interjecting here. Why don't you ask the Prime Minister about the millions he's donated to medical research
the Minister will come to
charitable
his answer.
organisations otherwise? No, not...
the Minister will come to his answer.
Not palatable for all the union hacks over there to hear a little bit of home truth? Well, I'm going to deliver you a little bit now. Now, Mr Speaker, well, they can protest all they want. The CFMEU own and operate this Labor opposition. There's no question about that. Now, Mr Speaker, one of the great achievements of this government has been to cancel the visas of criminals in this country, people who have perpetrated crimes on Australian citizens, and we've cancelled the visas now of over 100 outlaw motorcycle gang members, many of them with links to, guess which organisation? The CFMEU. The CFMEU. Now, people have written to me and said, Minister, thank you for cancelling the visa of that bikie that broke the arm of my employee. Thank you for cancelling the visa of that bikie who perpetrated this crime against my family. Most people are pretty happy with the fact that we're deporting criminals. There's one person in this parliament who's not. One person who's not happy with bikies with CFMEU links being deported. This fella here. This fella here, the Leader of the Opposition. The Leader of the Opposition leads a party that has received millions and millions and millions of dollars from CFMEU officials, and this Leader of the Opposition stands up for union bosses at every opportunity. He's not worried about workers, but he is here and he has not let the union bosses down one day. Every day he comes to work, he dedicates and rededicates himself to the cause of wanting to stand up for union bosses. Now, we have taken a decision to make the Australian society a safer place. We have taken a decision through the ABCC legislation to clean up building sites, because we know that if the CFMEU stop concrete pours and they put their own preferred subcontractors, I was going to say criminal subcontractors, some of them are, because they're charging an inflated price, that results in a higher price when people come to buy those units, or when people, in particular first home buyers, come to buy that unit from the developers because they've transferred that money to the preferred workers on that site. Now, why is this a problem? Why is this a problem that continues? It continues because there is a protection racket being operated by those opposite. Bikies are on work sites, on building sites around the country now, and they could be pulled off if this Leader of the Opposition had any leadership capacity whatsoever. But day after day after day, this Leader of the Opposition demonstrates that he's here for the union.
The member for McEwen is now warned. The member for Isaacs.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to the Prime Minister's answer just now and ask again, can the Prime Minister advise the House whether he donated $2 million or more than $2 million to the Liberal Party during the election? The Prime Minister knows the answer. Why won't he tell us?
Members on my left. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, this question is a complete red herring. The truth is, it does not relate to the Prime Minister's responsibilities as Prime Minister. It does not come in within his responsibilities, and therefore he can't be asked about it.
Members on my left, the member for Grainler and the member for Gorton will cease interjecting. I can barely hear the Leader of the House. The Manager of Opposition Business, I'll hear on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the point of order, this question refers to a previous answer given within this parliament by the Prime Minister. It then asks within that answer why the Prime Minister is unwilling to provide the information to the parliament. That is a completely legitimate question to ask.
The Leader of the House will cease interjecting. The member for Isaacs will cease interjecting, as will the Leader of the House. I presume the Leader of the House wants me to rule on the point of order. The Leader of the House makes a reasonable point. I considered ruling out the first question on this matter. I did because it does not go directly to the Prime Minister's responsibilities, and it was very line ball. I did allow it, and the Prime Minister answered the question. This question, however, refers to that previous answer. It covers much of the same territory, and for that reason I will allow it. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I have been scrupulous in disclosures of donations and receipts of donations under the Electoral Act. And
member for Jagu is warned.
I don't wish to make a big point of it, but the honourable member opposite, of course, overlooked a donation for 8 years. Now, what the honourable member is asking me to do is to make a disclosure in advance of it being disclosed under the Act. And any disclosures that I make were made in accordance with law and to the Electoral Commission, and are then disclosed by the AEC at the normal time. I comply scrupulously with the law, and the honourable member would be well advised to look to his own party to ensure that they do so too.
The member for Barara.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Justice and the Minister assisting the Prime Minister on counter-terrorism. Will the Minister update the House on the efforts of the Joint Police Task Force into industrial criminality and corruption? How is the task force tackling corrupt practices in the union movement?
The Minister for Justice.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for that question and the interest that he takes in these issues. Late last year, the Royal Commission into Trade Union Governance and Corruption found that criminality is rife amongst union officials and the trade union movement. Royal Commissioner Hayden stated, and this is a direct quote, "A lot of the criminal conduct for which unions and union officials are responsible arises out of a culture of defiance of all laws." A culture of defiance of all laws. Allegations heard by the Royal Commission included bribery, extortion, kickbacks, blackmail, intimidation and collusion with organised criminals in the construction industry. Collusion with organised criminals in the construction industry. This behaviour has either been ignored or allowed to flourish in a culture of fear, intimidation and coercion. Well, we on this side of the House are not going to tolerate lawlessness in any section of the Australian economy, and that is why we established specialised joint police task forces, federal police working alongside their state police counterparts to investigate and expose potential illegal activity uncovered during the Royal Commission. This has so far led to 93 referrals against 9 unions. This has led to a significant number of investigations, arrests and charges, and as an election commitment in the lead-up to the last election, we have allocated another $21 million to uncover union malfeasance. Now, we need to look no further than the extraordinary criminal record of one of the country's most powerful and disgraced unionists, John Setka, Victoria's State Secretary of the CFMEU. Now, he has either been charged or convicted in relation to 40 separate charges, and the latest on this long rap sheet includes blackmail. Yet, of course, the Labor Party are completely silent on the wrongdoing of the CFMEU, the bikies of the union movement. They are completely silent because they are in receipt of over $2.1 million of political donations, specifically from the CFMEU. Now, just late last month, police charged Cathy Jackson, the former head of the Health Services Union, with 70 counts of theft and deception in relation to offences. Now, these offences totalled over $500,000. Now, this is a great example of the work that the police have been doing.
Members on
my
left.
Now, interesting, Cathy Jackson, former Secretary of the Health Services Union. The same union as Labor's new senator in waiting, Kimberley Kitching, also from the HSU. And she has in common with Cathy Jackson the fact that the Royal Commission—
The Minister's time has expired. The Minister's time has expired. Well and truly. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. In newspaper reports today, the member for Warringah says that the existing protections against racist hate speech under Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act are, and I quote, getting completely out of hand. Does the Prime Minister agree with the views of his predecessor? Do these views reflect government policy?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. The honourable member for Warringah is like all honourable members, is free to express his views on the issues of the day. But as we recall, when the honourable member was the Prime Minister, my distinguished predecessor, the decision was taken by the government not to proceed with changes to Section 18C, and that decision has not been reviewed or altered.
The member for Barker.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Revenue and Financial Services. Will the minister update the House on how the government is raising professional standards for financial advisers? How will this action benefit Australian consumers?
The Minister for Revenue and Financial Services. The member for Chifley is warned.
Very good.
The Minister has the call.
I thank the member for Barker for his question, and of course he is somebody who has advocated very passionately to lift professional standards for financial advisers, because he knows that Australians rely on expert financial advice to secure their financial future. Today I announce that the Turnbull government will introduce legislation into the parliament to mandate professional standards for financial advisers. We know that it has taken the accountants hundreds of years to have high professional standards. We know that the same has occurred with lawyers, but we need to turbocharge high professional standards for financial advisers. Our reforms will include higher compulsory education requirements for both new and existing financial advisers, supervision for new advisers, a code of ethics for the industry, an exam that will represent a common benchmark right across the industry to weed out those people who are not professionally competent, and an ongoing professional development component that will mean that people need to continue to upgrade their skills. The government will also establish an independent standards body to govern the professional standing of the financial advice industry. It will be responsible for developing and for setting the exam, for developing the code of ethics, and for determining the education requirements for both new and for existing advisers. Our independent standard-setting body will raise the minimum standards for financial advisers in the sector, and it will ensure that the public can have confidence in financial advisers. Just to give one example, the current educational requirements for financial advisers is AQF 5. That means that they need to have a diploma equivalent skill. And it is possible to do this in less than 4 days. 4 days. We are saying it is important for financial advisers to have a degree or a degree-equivalent qualification. But raising financial standards for financial advisers is only one aspect of what the government is actually doing to ensure that consumers can have confidence in the financial system. As those here know, it was important that when we came into government that we conducted a root and branch review of the financial system through the Financial System Inquiry. Those opposite said it wasn't necessary and they didn't support it. In fact, that was the case despite the fact that they oversaw, while they were in government, scandal after financial scandal, many of which occurred while the Leader of the Opposition was Minister for Financial Services and Superannuation, and the Shadow Treasurer was Assistant Treasurer or Treasurer. They did nothing. They talked about it. We took action.
The Minister's time has expired. The member for Isaac.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to reports the government is preparing to strip a dual national of Australian citizenship for the first time, and that it expects the legislation to be challenged in the High Court. Is this the same legislation where a letter the Attorney-General provided to the Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security incorrectly represented advice from the Solicitor-General?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Look, Mr Speaker, all of us understand that the Shadow Attorney-General likes to engage in a sort of Guthrie-Featherstone QCMP versus Rumpole debate with the Attorney-General. I think we know that those two learned gentlemen do not entirely see eye to eye, and there is, from time to time, what can be best described as a disturbance in the bar common room, and the less erudite members of the parliament, as to say all the rest of us, are happy to let these great advocates get on with it. We're happy to let them do it. But, Mr Speaker, what the Shadow Attorney-General is now doing is taking his feud with the Attorney-General into an area where he is putting our national security at risk. He knows that the PJCIS—
The Prime Minister resume his seat. Members on my left will cease interjecting. I'm calling the Manager of Opposition Business, and I want to hear his point of order.
Mr Speaker, on direct relevance, you have previously, with preambles, been critical and said it opens the gate in terms of what will be allowed under direct relevance. This question asked very simply whether it was the same piece of legislation, and the relevance rule, accordingly, given your previous rulings, should be much tighter than where the current Prime Minister is going.
I appreciate the point of the Manager of Opposition Business. The question I listened to very carefully had a lot of content, and the Manager of Opposition Business will also be aware, covered a couple of subject matters, and he'll also be aware of my previous statements to this House that where tough questions are asked, I allow them, and I allow tough answers as well. Prime Minister is in order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, there is nothing more important than that we maintain a bipartisan solidarity in defence of the security of this country. There is nothing more important that the Shadow Attorney-General gets over his spat with the Attorney-General and focuses on the real issue, which is not the dispute in the bar, which is ensuring that our laws keep us safe and give our police and our intelligence services and our ministers the powers to keep us safe. And we've seen him today stirring up an issue about the powers to revoke citizenship from terrorists. This is a very important power. He sat on the Parliamentary Joint Committee. He brought his legal eminence to that committee. If he has a concern, he should be raising it within that committee, or if he can bear to speak to him, raising it with the Attorney-General or the Minister. And of course it doesn't stop there. This man went on last night to release a letter to me, which the Attorney-General has replied to at my request, suggesting again raising questions about other security legislation and his spat, the disagreement with the Solicitor-General. Once again, a responsible would-be Attorney-General would be raising those issues in the committee with a common bipartisan effort to get the laws right. And I just say to the Leader of the Opposition, we can well understand these great men of the bar don't see eye to eye, but they should put our safety first.
Just before I call the member for Goldstein, members on my left will cease interjecting, as will members on my right. Member for Goldstein can just resume his seat for a second. I inform the House we have present in the gallery this afternoon the Honourable Mia Davies, a Minister and Deputy Leader of the National Party in Western Australia, and the Honourable Colin Holt, Parliamentary Secretary and the Member for South West Region in Western Australia. On behalf of the House, I extend a very warm welcome to you both, and I call the member for Goldstein.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health and Aged Care. Will the Minister update the House on what the government is doing to improve affordable medicines and access to Medicare medicines for all Australians? Is the Minister aware of any alternative approaches?
The Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Goldstein for his question. And it's always a pleasure to emphasise this government's commitment to available affordable medicines and Medicare in general. Our $4 billion increase in spending over the next 4 years, our $95 billion investment in public hospitals in the current 5 years, our determination to constantly make medicines affordable to all Australians. And as I often say, the Labor Party's dirty secret behind the dirty Mediscare lie is that there actually wasn't any Labor health policy at all. So in the absence of no Labor health policy, you would think that Labor would have a health policy on an important area such as medicines. I've had to go back to a previous Minister for Health in a previous Labor government who said, and I quote, Health Minister Nicola Roxon makes no apology for deferring the listing of a number of critical drugs on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. Health Minister Nicola Roxon said, ultimately, I think the important point is that we can't in every instance guarantee that a drug will be listed immediately because there are financial consequences for doing that. So that is exactly the approach of Labor. We can't guarantee that we can list breakthrough medicines and breakthrough cures. By contrast, this government has never shied away from that task. The commitment that we made when we came to government, we have never stepped away from. And, Mr Speaker, I want to demonstrate that with an important listing. The biggest ever listing on the PBS was $1 billion. $1 billion for 4 medicines to cure hepatitis C in Australia: Harvoni, Sovalda, Declinzin and Ibavir. 4 medicines. Between them comprise 12 weeks of taking the tablets, the treatment, and then it actually is a cure. We are the first and probably the only jurisdiction in the world to make available this cure to every single Australian, without fear or favour. As Bob Geldof said, stigma, shame and fear can suffocate awareness in hepatitis C. So our approach was every individual, wherever they are, and we know that there are ordinary people like us who've contracted Hep C, but there are many people on the margins who have Hep C. It's overrepresented in the homeless, in injecting drug users, in remote communities, in the Indigenous populations, in prisons. So I wrote to every single state health minister to say, I want you to make these cures available to every single person, to the homeless, to those in prisons, to those who are disadvantaged, to those in drug and alcohol clinics. That's part of the government's $1 billion spend on medicines for Hep C. That's unprecedented in this country. And the point I make, Mr Speaker, is in the absence of a medicines policy from the opposition, and I invite them to actually provide their medicines policy any time, we know that only a government that carefully manages the national accounts can manage this investment.
The Minister's time has expired. The member for Isaac.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. I again refer to reports the government is preparing to strip a dual national of Australian citizenship for the first time, and that it expects the legislation to be challenged in the High Court. Given this is the same legislation where a letter the Attorney-General provided to the Intelligence Committee incorrectly represented advice from the Solicitor-General, what are the risks to national security in the event of a successful legal challenge? What is the reason for the government misrepresenting the advice of the Solicitor-General?
The Prime Minister has the floor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Shadow Attorney-General is a member of the committee. The Shadow Attorney-General was party to a unanimous, bipartisan set of recommended amendments to the legislation, to which he presumably gave his very best attention. Now, he makes assertions about legal advice not being given. The government, as he knows, does not comment on its legal advice, but the allegations that he's made have been rejected, as he knows, elsewhere by the attorney. But I'd simply make this point to the honourable member. We are dealing with very serious security issues. The risk of terrorism that we face, the threat of terrorism we face, is greater than ever. Daesh is being defeated in the field. We are at risk of foreign fighters returning, of people closely associated with them returning, and it is vital that my ministers, my government, has the tools, the legislative tools, to ensure that they can keep us safe. Now, we have the Shadow Attorney-General raising constitutional questions, apparently, about this legislation, which he recently signed off on. If he has those concerns, I would suggest he holds his nose and does the unspeakable thing of talking to the attorney. I'd suggest he does that. I suggest he puts his personal animosity aside and speaks to the Attorney-General. If he has real concerns, he's got to get over. He's got to get over these petty personal animosities and get on our team, get on Australia's team to ensure that we have the right legislation.
Members on my
yes, you can mock, but your job, his job, I'd say, Leader of the Opposition, is to work to keep these laws secure. And he now raises the issue overnight about the post-sentence detention legislation, agreed to by all the states, of vital importance to ensure that we can keep our citizens safe. Those concerns, if he believes in his legal eminence, that there are flaws or constitutional problems, raise them in the committee. And we have to work together on this legislation. The member opposite believes he has a great legal brain. Let him bring it to the committee and ensuring that we get the right legislation, not these questions that are designed simply to derive political advantage for Labor.
Is the member for Isaac seeking leave to table the document?
Seek to table the letter of the Attorney-General dated the 27th of August 2015 in which he misrepresented the advice of the Solicitor-General.
I believe the letter is already a parliamentary paper. The member for Isaacs will resume his seat. The member for Banks has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Urban Infrastructure. Will the minister update the House on the progress of Western Sydney Airport? How will this nation-building project deliver on the government's economic plan?
The Minister for Urban Infrastructure.
Well, I do thank the member for Banks for his question on this very important issue, which is the progress in relation to Western Sydney Airport and the work that the government is doing towards Western Sydney Airport being ready to open in the mid-2020s. We have now finalised the environmental impact statement in relation to Western Sydney Airport, and that has been provided to my colleague, the Minister for the Environment, in mid-September. Now, the final environmental impact statement draws on some 700 field investigations, 19 technical studies, and it is very comprehensive in the matters it addresses, such matters as noise impact modelling, an assessment of air and water quality, health risk assessments, and all of the matters that should be considered in an environmental impact statement for a project of this scale. And of course, it follows the draft environmental impact statement, which was issued last year, and there are some very important changes which the government has made in response to community consultation on the draft environmental impact statement. We've made a commitment that there will be no single merge point over the town of Blaxland. We've made a commitment that there will be no single merge point over any residential community. And we've expressed the position that our preferred option is for head-to-head operations to the southwest of the airport, the more lightly populated area, between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m, where safe to do so. What that will mean is that flights during this time will both take off and land to the southwest in this period where it's safe to do so. Now, it's very important that we do the detailed work to determine exactly when it will be safe to have head-to-head operations directed towards the southwest, but the early indications are that in over 80% of the time, head-to-head operations to the southwest will be safe. Now, Mr Speaker, Western Sydney Airport, when it opens, will be closer than Kingsford Smith Airport, will be a more convenient option for some 2 million people. And of course, the 2012 joint study on aviation capacity in the Sydney region pointed out that by 2027 there will be no more slots available at Kingsford Smith Airport. By around 2035 there will be practically no scope for the further growth of revenue passenger services at Kingsford Smith Airport. So Western Sydney Airport is very important to meet the capacity needs of Sydney and of Australia, and of course it will deliver a major economic boost to Western Sydney. Some 11,000 jobs during the construction phase, and of course by the early 2030s, some 9,000 jobs directly at the airport, as well as the economic activity that will be attracted. So the Turnbull government is getting on with the job. The EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, a key step towards
the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
I'd just like to address this. The member for Jagga Jagga was interjecting that I recognise the Prime Minister. I want to be really clear on this because I did chastise the Leader of the Opposition on this very subject, and this is the last time I want to make this point. I'm happy to circulate the page from practice. The Prime Minister can end question time at any time. In fact, it states it very clearly, even during an answer or even during a question. And I'm saying that to the member for Jagga, because if there's a repeat of this, I'll have to take action. And for the member for Isaacs, whilst I admire his athletic endeavours at the end of question time each day, there's no point to them.